welcome you into the warm embrace of Carolina Church, and I guarantee you that when you leave this experience, you're not only going to be connected to us, but you're going to be empowered and you're going to be blessed. Stay tuned to our digital worship. Well, hello, everybody. Listen, thank you for joining us to our series entitled Race Matter. We're honored to God to have you be a part of the audience today. Welcome. Even after going through the 8 minutes and 40 some odd seconds and hearing the young man lift before us the song, I Just Want to Live. The truth of the matter is, race matters in this United States. Our country is really at a moment of reckoning. It's not with only the police, but there is a systemic system that is brewing in our country that happens to be in the soul and the DNA of our country, that somehow or another equality escapes those based upon their race. And so on today, I'm joined today on this panel with individuals who I believe could help us begin to dialogue, who could help us to begin to have conversation. I don't believe that we're going to get to the place of finding all the answers in a matter of 45 minutes. But I do believe that we've got to start somewhere. And the start is literally about us having conversation. And so on today, I've assembled a panel of guests who's come alongside with me to help me in introducing this subject regarding race. I have today Brother Bobby Mathieu, is a proud husband to Jamie and a loving father of Joey and James and Jamia, Victoria, and Melanie. Serves as the DC public school system for 21 years, teaching at Mary Church Terrell, Savoy, River Terrace, and Garfield Elementary Schools, Ballou Senior High School. And for over 20 years, he served as the associate pastor under the leadership of his dad, the late Pastor Bob Mathieu, at the Anacostia Gospel Chapel. He and his wife directed the highly acclaimed Camp Dynamite summer program as well. What a tremendous program it was, and it is. He has twice received the Outstanding Father of Prince George's County Public Schools Award and is the recipient of the Ingrid M. Turner Amazing Parent Award. Bobby serves currently children and youth at the Landmark Church of Alexandria. I want to say welcome to you on today. I'm also happy to have with us Chelsea Okoroh, who is the co-founder of Black Girls for Black Lives. Chelsea Okoroh is a 21-year-old native of Glenarden, Maryland. She serves as the senior class vice president of Bowie State University. Chelsea is also a co-founder of Black Girls for Black Lives, the group of young ladies who lead the Black Lives movement in PG that marched at the National Harbor on June the 6th. Chelsea is very vocal on issues concerning the injustice towards the Black community. She also serves as the president of Bowie Women in Business, CAC House of Mercy, youth leader, and plans to start a mentoring program called Father Figures and Big Brothers later in the year. Welcome, Chelsea. So honored to have you here with us on today. I'm also honored to have with us today the Assistant State's Attorney, who in fact has been working with that office for 14 years. What a tremendous accomplishment. Also serves as the County Council rep for the MGM Oversight Committee. His education stems from Jewish Doctor of Law at University of Dayton and holds a bachelor from Morgan State University. It's an honor to have you here with us on today. Thank you for being here. I want to begin with our panel talking about this whole idea and subject around race, and allow you all to give an opening statement about how you view race in the United States. How has it been handled To the best of your ability, I would love to hear from you all about your thinking and your thoughts around race and the struggle that we're currently in. Chelsea, why don't we start with you? Ladies always first.
Thank you for the question. Well, as an opening statement, I believe that, of course, America, and I feel like in 2020 itself has shown how important this discussion about race is. Black people have faced injustice for years, for hundreds of years. It's not just 2020 that things are coming to light. This is a continuous fight that we've been fighting since we know, like since our ancestors have been fighting, and now we are at the front lines. And that's why it's important to have conversations like this with each other, with people you don't even know, because things that you know, people might not know, and that's why education is key. Knowing things and spreading that information, but also just I feel as though the racism in America, it comes to the point where it's sad that we're still having certain conversations, that there's certain things that should just be known as human beings. And I feel as though even now in America, what we're fighting for, it's not like we're fighting for something more. We're fighting to be treated as decent human beings. And that's why we're on the front lines. It's not even like we're asking for too much. We're asking for the basic treatment. And we're not going to stop fighting until we get it.
Good, thank you. Bobby, listen, you are the only white man on this panel.
Yes, sir.
And the truth of the matter is, your outside doesn't reflect your inside, because many of us believe that you're a soul brother all the way through.
Oh, I appreciate it.
Welcome, Bobby. Thank you for being a part of this panel.
I think you gave us a question that I'm not sure we can answer in one statement.
All right.
However, I think for me, race is an issue that's very ambiguous, because how do you decide whether a person is a specific race? My children are biracial, and so I've purposely taught them that they're biracial. They're not mixed. If you say that you're mixed, then you have no identity. But to teach you that you're biracial, that means you can embrace both identities. And there's so many people of different ethnicities in the United States, that how do we decide just by looking whether someone is a certain race? Now, having said that, we know that racism is an issue in the United States, and I feel like racism has always been linked to power and to control. And if we don't address those issues of power and control, we're always going to struggle. And one thing that's difficult for me is the fact I feel like the church should be leading the way. The scripture says they will know that we are his disciples by our love for one another. And the church, black, white, Asian, Hispanic, I feel like the church should be the one that's woke. The church should be the one that is leading the way in this in this unity thing. And the church is lagging behind. And I feel like, and this is my opinion, but I feel like it's time for the church to wake up and to lead the way, so our nation can follow.
Thank you, sir. Assistant State's Attorney?
Sure. I'll try to be as brief as I can in my opening remarks. That's a lot for one question. I will say that it is unfortunate that we find ourselves here, but I think there's a powerful opportunity here as well. The recent events have put this country back into a position where we have to discuss this. And I would say that even though I'm disappointed as to how we got here, I'm very encouraged by what I've seen in terms of groups, human advocacy groups that are really pushing a progressive agenda in this field. America is America, and its history is its history. But I'm highly encouraged that we're certainly not where we used to be. And I'm very encouraged by the progressive movements that I've seen recently.
I think you all, we sat here and went through the process of the 8 minutes that we saw
the span of time for George Floyd on that ground with this police officer's knee on his neck. And it was quite chilling, to say the least, quite chilling. When we look at this, clearly we see police brutality. We see a police officer who became judge, juror, and executioner all at the same time, to the point where we hear George Floyd saying, "I can't breathe," resisting arrest. In no ways were there any sign of resisting arrest of anything at all. And yet, he dies. Protests all over America, outside of the United States, started demonstrating. And we target police brutality. I'd like to see if you all believe that that's the problem. Is it police brutality, or is it a system that happens to utilize that entity of our law enforcement agency to marshal or to keep people, specifically Black people and people of color, in their place? Chelsea?
Thank you for the question. I believe police brutality is just one element of the problem. There's many different factors that come into place. It is systemic racism. There is, before you even get stopped by a police officer, that you face these type of challenges. It's in the classroom when it comes to education. It's the healthcare, the healthcare system. It's housing. It's way more than just police brutality. There's different areas that need to be fixed. Of course, police brutality is one of them. However, there are many more areas that we have to tackle before we can say that there's equality in the world. Thank you.
Bobby?
I don't remember the exact year, but many years ago, the courts issued a statement about being separate but equal, when in reality, things were separate but unequal. And I see the same thing still in our nation today. You can look at DC, and certain wards have a lack of resources. Certain wards have more money. You can look at Prince George's County inside the Beltway and outside the Beltway, and you can see the differences. And so I think police brutality is only one symptom of a systemic problem that needs to be addressed. And all these years later, we are separate, but we are still unequal because of the injustices in our nation.
Wow, good.
I think at the end of the day, America has a culture of racism. And we have to understand that's how America was born. You're not going to get rid of a culture quickly. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes conscious movement to get to where we actually want to be. And that is something that America's just going to have to deal with. It's something that all of us are going to have to deal with. But I think we have to be honest in our approach. I think platforms like this are excellent. But America is America. But I'm very happy, and again, I'm highly encouraged as to where we are going.
So let me just ask, with America being America, is there a level of expectation that we are to tolerate?
Oh, no.
Okay, I'll make sure say more about your piece. I want to make sure I'm clear then, because I want to be, because America is America, and because it was founded on the basis of racism, should we continue, or does there come a time when we ought to evolve to become better than how we started?
Absolutely. Okay. We have to evolve.
Okay.
And I think we will. I think we are. Like I said, I'm highly encouraged as to what I've been seeing recently.
Okay. So many persons are calling for police reform, as if that is the only ill. Clearly, you all agree with me on this panel that police brutality is only one aspect of racism. But we've heard them calling for police reform, and I'm wondering, what does that look like? Does anybody have an idea what kind of reform would we welcome? What you think? Anybody?
When it comes to police reform, I think more so, I would believe that I'm one of the people who sort of believe in the abolish the police. More so, abolish what the police stood for and stands on now, because I feel as though the foundation was broken to begin with. If you look into history, the police started as slave patrol. The police was before in the 1900s. It was they were put in place to catch slaves. So to change that into what is now the police department, you can see that the foundation was already broken. It was already rigid. So you can't expect to keep layering things on. That's like building a house with a bad foundation. The house is bound to fail. The house is bound to fall. So I believe police reform starts with, first, if we're not going to abolish the police and start from the beginning, we have to look at the problems that are within the police, and also defunding the police as well. I feel as though we're putting too much power and obligation into these cops.
So I'm gonna come back to the defunding the police department. I really want to zero in on what does reform look like. Now, you said something interesting that you can't build the house on a faulty foundation. The police genesis was on the basis of rounding up runaway slaves.
Yes.
Okay? So then, if we're talking about abolishing the police, somewhere along the line, the idea of police shifted to no longer catching slaves, but catching criminals.
Yes.
Supposedly.
Supposedly,
Okay.
yes.
So then, if we abolish them, then where do we go from there as it relates to society being civil in its behavior and its livelihood?
Okay. Well, some states already, instead of, when things happen or emergencies happen, they don't necessarily call for the police to come. They call for mental health specialists, or they have groups already in their communities that de-escalate situations. So it's not, the police, of course, they're needed to an extent. However, all power does not lie within the police,
Gotcha.
if that makes sense.
Okay, good. Stacey Turner, I'd like to hear from you, sister.
Sure.
What's your thoughts?
I have a lot of thoughts, actually. When it comes to reforming the police department, what you have to understand is, again, you're trying to reform a culture, okay? Those police officers, God bless them, they're trained how to use force, because that's the nature of their job. I mean, some of those guys, they get a call for an unknown disturbance, and that's all they know. They show up, and they have to handle that situation accordingly. What I would like to see with regards to reform the culture of the police department is encouraging those good officers to point out those bad officers. I think that's important, because when you do that, you end up taking off that veil of secrecy, so to speak. You're encouraging the good actors to be good actors. I think when you encourage that, when those kinds of behaviors are encouraged and rewarded, I think you're going to see a big difference in how our police departments across the country are policing our citizens.
I'm going to come to you in a minute, Bobby, but let me just ask the Assistant State's Attorney, given the culture of our police department and this whole code of silence, whether it's the blue silence, whatever, however you want to label it, is that a probable solution for us to believe that the culture would lend for police officers, for lack of a better word, snitch on another officer who happens to be a bad cop? Is that something that's likely to happen?
I think we've actually seen it happen before. Certainly in our office, we had one of, well, I could think of at least one case off the top of my head where it was the police department that came to our office and said, hey, listen, we need to charge these guys, or we need to at least refer these guys for prosecution. That's what I like to see. Okay. I like to see those officers who can stand in a situation and say, that's not a good idea, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, because when we look at George Floyd, it was as if one cop was the one who was perpetrating the killing, while the other three kneeled by saying absolutely nothing. So in my estimation, I look at the time length of those guys who were there, you know, one or two of them were rookies who had not had the seniority. So here you have a cop who has seniority who is leading this arrest. And I'm not quite sure if the culture of our police department would lend to that rookie cop saying to this cop with seniority, man, you're handling this wrong, without there being repercussions within the fraternity. Mm-hmm. That's my concern. And whether or not that is what we are even proposing here, a likely avenue for us changing the culture of our police department. Bobby, tell me what do you see as reform, if you have any thoughts on that at all?
So if I can make a correlation between the police and the school system, because the school system is what I'm familiar with, there are a lot of teachers who have been teaching for a long time. I would call them old school. And they have an authoritarian perspective. I'm the teacher, you listen to me because I'm the teacher, and that's what it is. That's a certain mindset, a certain paradigm that they follow. Then you will have teachers who are, they shouldn't be in the system. As a former teacher, I can say there are people who are working there that really shouldn't be there. And then you have, besides teaching, besides instruction, you have all these other responsibilities that have been added onto educators that really aren't their responsibility. I see some correlations between that and the police department, that there may be an old school model where the police, you listen to us, and that's that. And I understand the use of force, but I also understand that society is different these days. And just like with some teachers have escalated situations that didn't need to be escalated, and then the student was the one that got blamed for it. I think it's quite possible that there's lots of situations where police have escalated a situation, but then it looks like the victim or whoever it is that they're dealing with is the one that's at fault, when in fact they could have de-escalated the situation. I'm not sure whether additional training is part of it. I'm not sure whether vetting people prior to being hired is part of it. But I do think that police have a lot of additional responsibilities besides just policing. And I'm concerned when it comes to police reform, like you said, about confronting the culture. Is it one of those things where we just need to abolish it and start all over? Or is it something where we need to try to change a culture? I'm not sure what the answer is to that.
So, Assistant State's Attorney, Brother Rashid, does the State's Attorney Office have any part in or any thoughts about reform? Do they play a role in that in all with our police department?
Well, legally speaking, we don't come into a case until after it's been charged.
Okay.
So on a one-to-one basis, what we're doing, particularly we'll be doing like felony screening cases. Okay, felony screening case when the police officer comes to our office and they say, "Hey, we want to charge these felonies. Can we have a discussion about that?" And then we review the case with them. So as we're reviewing the case with them, that's when we get a chance to kind of learn a little bit about our officers. A lot of times, when we have particular cases, we have to tell the police officers, and we have the authority to tell the police department, no, we're not going to charge that case, or we're not going to move forward with that case. That's one of the one-to-one kind of, I don't want to call it a training, but that's how we get to educate a lot of our officers as to how we're doing things, how we're not going to do things. I'm not sure if that really answers your question.
So let me ask you, one of the things that I'm noticing with PG's police officers, I know that we have the DMV, but specifically Prince George's, is that they don't necessarily have, not all of the officers have cameras. Is there a move to move our police officers in that direction that you know of?
There is.
Okay.
There is. And just by me following some of the press reports that have been out there, I expect to see all of our officers with cameras soon.
Okay. It's interesting though, and I haven't forgotten the funding question. I'm going to come back to that. But it's interesting to me that even with all of the cameras, video, tape that we have that's been given to our law officials, that it's still difficult to charge police officers, even with evidence. And then if they do get charged, they get arrested, but then are acquitted. I'm not quite sure how that works, and I just really wanted to kind of process this, and if you all had any thoughts, I really want to hear that, because it's interesting to me that you can get caught with your hand in a cookie jar and still walk away. This sounds like there's some standard of which the public may not know about as it relates to how an officer gets charged, or it might be that there are a different set of rules for people who work in law enforcement versus those of us who are the average citizen. Anybody can jump in whenever you want to.
I just want to say it's not difficult. They just choose not to. It's not. I feel as though exactly what you said. Your hands in the cookie jar. Everyone in the world is saying it's in the cookie jar, but then you get to walk away. It never made any sense to me. And to think about it, there's only a certain amount of videos that you do see. Now you have to think about the videotapes that we don't see, that don't blow up on social media, that don't make the news channels, that and I'm not sure if it's because of qualified immunity or what it is. However, I think that's a problem in itself, that you'll see a police officer shoot someone point blank, even sometimes in the back, with without being provoked, and then they get away with it. And then it shows like if they're basically above the law. That's what it shows me. It shows that they can do whatever they want, and they can get away with it. But they'll charge someone for years for a marijuana possession after a police officer shot someone, killed someone, took them from their loved ones, and they get to go home to their families. And I don't understand it. I can't wrap my mind around it in any type of way. It's just wrong. And I hope that they throw away qualified immunity, because it makes I understand why they might have put it in there. However, if you have a system, everyone should be judged in that system. There shouldn't be, okay, this group of people are going to go through the courts the right way, and then officers are going to get to do whatever they want and get away with it. So.
State's Attorney, do you have any comments on that?
One thing that we have to understand is that when it comes to particularly state-based or local-based charges, each jurisdiction is completely independent. And whoever's in charge, they want to see it their way.
Meaning, you say each jurisdiction, so PG or DC or if it's Virginia.
Correct.
So each jurisdiction
Have their local law enforcement agencies who are charged with the decision making with regards to that case.
which is what we saw with Ahmaud Arbery.
Cause what you'll end up seeing is, depending on what happens and where it happens, you might get a different outcome, if that makes any sense. And that depends on, of course, the people who are making the decision at that particular point.
Wow.
Right.
That's interesting. Because then that means it becomes subjective based upon interpretation of the individual.
Well, remember also, each case is completely different from the next case, okay? And there are a lot of stuff that you will see on tape. A lot of times, the question becomes, well, what happened before the tape started going? It could be a thousand other issues. But again, each jurisdiction, whether it be this county or that county, they will take their particular case, they will look at it, and then they will make a charging decision based on what they see and based on what they know.
Let me segue for a moment. I appreciate you being here. What's your understanding of the defunding process? What do you see?
And you know what? I'm getting, and just watching the media, I keep getting a lot of different approaches, because on one end, they're saying just defund the police entirely. What I'm getting a sense of is that, in another sense, it's more of a defund the police, not entirely, but to divert funds to certain
Right, areas.
Right, exactly.
Kind of like what Chelsea said, rather than having police arrest someone who has a mental issue, why not we fund persons who can handle people with mental illnesses and let that be our course of action, rather than having to put them in jail, lock them up, and refuse treatment? Okay. All right. What's your idea, your thought of defunding?
Okay, so for defunding the police, in my eyes, it's more so defunding the police and reinvesting funds into communities. So that falls along the lines of housing, education, healthcare, things of that nature. Even for schools, instead of having police officers in schools, you would put more counselors, more mental health officials in the schools, more social workers in the schools. The police, I was in a meeting with Progressive Maryland last week, and they were speaking on how the police department on average is given more funding than any other country's military funding, which, when you think about it, it's really crazy if you really put it into ideology. However, defunding the police is more so investing those funds into resources for the community. I feel as though, why does the police department need billions of dollars? What are they really doing with it? Rather than, there are homeless people on the streets. When we have enough money to build centers to help rehabilitate them, to help them get into better situations, along with like re-entry programs for those who were incarcerated, when they come out, giving them an opportunity for a better life. So defunding the police, it doesn't necessarily, in my perspective, it's not take all the money away from the police department. No, however, it's giving appropriate budgets to different funds, like even Maryland HBCUs, giving money to more educational programs and things of that nature, municipal centers. So that's what defunding the police is for me.
I want to, the last 15 minutes of our segment here, I want to shift the conversation for a moment. I think it's interesting that when we start talking about white privilege, which I think is best described, by the way, is being placed in a stream of water and you having to swim in the direction that the stream is flowing versus having to swim against the stream, trying to go upstream, is just difficult. However, my white brothers and sisters literally had the opportunity to flow with the stream, with the current. I want to know, Bobby, I hate to put you on the spot, but you're the only white guy sitting up here with me, so I figured why not ask you? Why do our white brothers and sisters resist the term white privilege? What's your thinking on that?
So you're asking me to speak for a whole group of people,
Well,
which honestly I'm not really that familiar with. However, I'm going to try to answer your question. I think a lot of it comes to a blindness, because I feel like when you're the recipient of the privilege, when you're the recipient of the benefit, then there's a lot of times when you don't actually see. But then when it's pointed out to you, that's threatening your power, that's threatening your control. And so, you know, they have the term now, white fragility, where you have to be careful about how you say something because you don't want to offend someone. And, you know, I feel like if it's wrong, it's wrong. If it's sin, call it what it is. But I think a lot of people, a lot of white people don't want to address it because it's threatening their position. It's threatening their power. It's threatening their control. It's threatening money. And to admit that it's wrong means that then there's action that's required. And there's hard conversations that need to be had. There's forgiveness.
Would that be like reparations of some sort?
Maybe.
A renunciation of what has happened?
I mean, I was looking last night trying to find if there was even ever an apology. I've seen apologies to the Asians who were incarcerated during the Second World War.
And they paid them.
Yes. And in fact, I saw that there were reparations for slave owners when slavery ended because they were losing their business. But why have we not ever apologized for slavery?
Well, how about, I want the apology, but I also want my 40 acres.
I agree.
And my mules.
I agree, but where's the start? Where's the beginning? Where's the statement that we as a country were wrong? This should have never happened. And then here's where we're going to go from there. You know, start with saying we were wrong and then put some measurable outcomes in place to say this is how we're showing that we're wrong.
Wow.
But that's just my opinion.
Well, thank you for your opinion, sir. We like your opinion. Chelsea, what you think? What you think?
No, he definitely hit the nail on the head. Just to add to what he was saying, I also think that they resist the term white privilege because of the accountability that comes with it, that comes with knowing that you're put on the pedestal from when you're conceived, that you're already 10 steps ahead of other communities because you're white. Also, just even I stumbled upon it was a picture of, I'm guessing it was like a newspaper, it was an article from years ago, and it was Capitol Heights. It was real estate, and it was like $1 down a month. Basically, it was saying that I guess it's when, you know, real estate was booming because it was only allowed for white people, for white people. Like even on the paper it said no Negroes. So it was literally putting a block on black people from having wealth, from accumulating these resources. And that's just like a little part of white privilege. It comes with when you really speak to, and that's why I'm happy to, or I'm encouraged to see, you know, not only black people on the streets, but seeing other races walking with us, because as a people, we support everyone. Whenever anyone else is fighting, black people are on the front lines with them. So it's nice to see other people, but it's also, there's still a group of people who don't acknowledge that they do have privilege, that they are, you know, they're given the right direction from birth, and all they have to do is swim, while other people, the Black people, we're literally, there's obstacles placed in our way every step of the way in life. And I guess that's all I can say.
So
about
Chelsea,
that.
listen, you are considered, by the way, a Black Lives Matter activist. That's how you're labeled. You are an activist of Black Lives Matter. Okay? Some have said that Black Lives Matter is a terrorist group. We will leave nameless the person who listed you all as such, but they've listed you as a terrorist group, which we know is far from the truth. Others will say, but all lives matter. And we've heard that discussion, that argument 50 million times.
Yes, we have.
How do you respond to that as a Black Lives Matter activist?
I feel as though, well, the Black Lives Matter is a terrorist group. It's just a distraction. That's what I look at it as. They see the power and they see the unity within us, and that's threatening. And that's where the whole it's a terrorist group comes in. Even if you pay attention to the news outlets and what they are showing, when it was looting and rioting, they were showing it 24/7 back to back. But when it was only peaceful protests, then you stopped covering it. They stopped showing it as much because they wanted to depict Black Lives Matter, Black people as a certain, as dangerous as, as terrorist or whatever you like to call it. However, there are real terrorist groups out here that need to be labeled as terrorist group, as the KKK.
So what's interesting to me is that Black Lives Matter protests fighting for equality get to be labeled by high political officials as a terrorist group. But just over the bridge in Virginia, where white supremacist groups gather, and there is violence, and even a person killed as a result. And we get high political officials who say, but they're good people too. How does that make you feel?
Well, I guess it makes me really reconsider who we even elect as officials. I guess that's the main thing, and that's why I encourage everyone to always vote, to vote in every election, even the local elections. They are important. However, in my standpoint, I can't necessarily force someone to do what's right. However, I feel like everyone knows right from wrong, and if the public officials want to paint their picture this certain way, I think it's important as a people, as Americans, to look at how they deal with certain situations and vote accordingly to that.
So listen, so then here's the question, you all. We've got 7 minutes. Where do we go from here? Okay. How do we begin, Bobby, to dismantle systemic racism? I want to hear from both of you. What do we do? How do we begin to dismantle this? What's your thoughts?
I feel like if the Church of Jesus Christ has the power of Jesus Christ behind us, we should be setting the standard.
Okay, now Bobby, let me jump in here for a minute. Listen, I hear what you're saying, but my white evangelical brothers and sisters are silent and are saying absolutely nothing. While on the other hand, I have my clergy of color fighting for, and my white brothers and sisters aren't saying anything. And you say the church needs to be the first to lead this.
The church of all colors. And for the first time, when instance happened with Ahmaud Arbery, I finally started to hear some of my white evangelical friends speak out. And honestly, for me, I've been selective. The ones who I hear speaking out, those are the ones I know I can have conversations with. Those are the ones I know I can collaborate with. The other ones, you know, I really don't pay them no mind, because you can't really change a person's mindset. And I feel like, as the church, that some of these other political organizations would not have needed to be formed if we were setting the standard and we were confronting injustice, if we were confronting racism. You just pointed out, within evangelicalism, racism is alive and well. And I think that even before we start to address the national issues, we have to address the sickness in the body of Christ. We have to address it. And that's only through conversations. That's only through building relationships cross-culturally, through doing that intentionally.
So if you're going to build the relationships, though, you just said to me that in your interaction,
Yes.
that you choose to interact with those who think like you, but you choose not to interact with those who don't think like you. And Bobby, in all honesty, that's where the problem is, because we've got to be intentional about engaging that crowd in conversation that they might start looking at our experience from our eyes and not from their perspective.
And so I hear what you said. That's not exactly what I meant to say. I do think there are some that are so far to one extreme that it's a waste of time. And maybe that's just me being cynical. Maybe that's where I grew up, in the hood, and I've seen too much for too long, and maybe I'm cynical. However, that's one thing that I've been doing since this stuff started happening again, is having these conversations with people, because it's necessary. It's necessary for people to see the racism in their denomination, in their churches, the racism that's not being addressed. And we can't address it on a national level until we get it right.
Chelsea, I need you to chime in and tell me what you think we ought to start doing. You're the youngin' on this panel. I want to hear from you about how you see and believe that we ought to start dismantling racism.
Okay. The start, I feel as though, that's why I like the interaction you all just had. We have to become comfortable with being uncomfortable, comfortable with having uncomfortable conversations, even with people who are far off, because you never know, you might just plant one seed in their mind and they might not know about it then, but later on in life, they'll think back to the time you told them what you told them when you tried to have that conversation. And then also just through legislation, there's so many paths that can be taken within dismantling the system. And we have to focus on, I guess we could do small steps until they lead to big steps. Any progress is progress. And I guess that's my mindset for now. But I'm tired of performative acts, I will say that. However, we need to start actually taking action and taking the steps. Of course, protests are great. However, we need to start seeing the change that we're fighting for. As a people, we need to start seeing the change that we're literally every day marching on the streets for. And I guess that's where it lies. It starts with just how do I say this? I guess it lies within starting with the systems. The systems are broken. The systems aren't even broken. They were never in place for our favor. They were never for us. So the systems just need to change. I feel like that's the start, the making a system that's just and equal for all people.
That's good. That's good. Here's how I end our segment today. Let me thank you all so very much. This was just rich conversation for me and for our viewers. to be able to sit and begin to talk. And I think it's therapy in this process. I want to end it like this, you all. I was blown away this morning when I was awakened to the news of a mother and her son in Baltimore, my hometown, made their way to a restaurant. This happened to have been an upscale kind of restaurant because there's a certain wardrobe requirement, supposedly. And they walked in. Her son happened to be dressed in sports apparel and was told by two of the waitresses that they could not serve them because her son was dressed in sports apparel. Mom took out her phone and recorded, however, a white family that was there who had the exact same shirt on, had been seated and served, and clearly you could tell that this was blatant racism. Not being administered from the police department with police brutality, but this is now business. Just blatant racism. Now, I believe they said the manager called the mother, apologized, and said that they were going to implement sensitivity training. Now, I'm going to be honest with you all. I'm tired of sensitivity training. What I want to see happen is that when these kind of acts of blatant racism or racism, period, in any system raises its ugly head, that literally we hit them where it hurts. You all are more intelligent than me, and we already know, Bobby, that America doesn't understand anything that doesn't have dollar bills attached to it. What will be the fall of this country, and I want to say this to the cameras, I want y'all to hear me, what will be the fall of this country is the greed of America. It's the greed. And until we understand that racism comes with a cost, we will continue to have systems that are designed to keep people of color with the knee of white America on their neck. Hey, listen, thank you for tuning in and letting us have conversation with you. I look forward to when we can come back together again and discuss this matter even further, because it's only when, as Chelsea stated, that we have conversation that makes us feel uncomfortable, that we can get to a place of comfort in deriving a strategy for how we begin to dismantle this ugly monster called racism. Father God, in the name of Jesus, thank you for the privilege of being able to have conversation. We dare not move without invoking your presence and asking you to help us develop strategy. God, we need you. And we can't do anything without you. So for the sickness of this country, for the sin-sick soul of our country, God, we cry out to you. Give us leaders help us, God, to accomplish what you've placed before us, making you first in our lives, loving the stranger, being kind to the immigrants, the foreigners, and treating every individual as a human being, knowing, God, that there is only one race, and that's the human race that you created. Lord, hear our prayer today. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Hey, listen, I'm grateful for your presence today. I do want you to know that if you are watching and you say, hey, Pastor, I want to be saved. I want to give my life to Christ. I don't want to live in a world any longer without Christ being the source of my life. I want to recommend Jesus Christ to you today. I want to suggest to you that the only way to overcome is to have a relationship with Him. Maybe you say, hey, Pastor, I had a relationship with the Lord, but I walked away from Him. Maybe you want restoration today, to be restored back to the family. I need you to know that God is a God of restoration. Maybe you would like to, in fact, have membership in a ministry like this, who believes that God is concerned about even the social events in our society. I welcome you to have membership in this ministry. Whatever your request might be, whether it's relationship, restoration, or membership, just drop it in the box. Counselors are waiting to minister to you even now, believing that even God is waiting for you to make that move. Because His word says, behold, I stand at the door knocking, trying to get into your heart. Won't you open up and let Him in today? Jesus can save even you. God bless you. Before you sign off today, for those who are members of our ministry, I want to ask that you would sow into the kingdom by way of giving today. Thank you so very much. And as you give, there are many ways you can do that. You can mail in, cash check. You can, in fact, text to give, push pay, or give online. Thank you for your consistent giving and for your commitment to tithe and honor the Lord with that which He's given to you. If this has been a blessing to you and you want to see more, just send us your comments at info@Carolina Church, at info@Carolina Church, and I'm sure that we could continue this conversation further. Love to hear from you. God bless you, and may heaven smile upon you. Hey, listen, I need you to stay safe. I need you to stay home if you can. I need you to stay connected. But I also need you to stay Carolina strong. On your mark, get set, let's grow.